Before getting into the video, I do have a couple of quick announcements. Firstly, I have the second channel where I post non-power scaling related content now, so make sure to check that out. It will be in the pinned comment and in the description. Secondly, I held a thumbnail competition on my Discord server where users would submit their created thumbnails and vote on whose thumbnail was the best. Here's the winner of the thumbnail competition, shout out to Broken Limit. Their credit is also in the description. Also, this was like a while ago, but of course I haven't posted in so long, so I haven't been able to show it off in a while. Current day Nuzlite here. After having edited this video, it took so long to do so because of my procrastination that we held another thumbnail tournament on the Discord server. This time the winner was AG the OG, shout to him, his links and all that will be in the description below. And yeah, let's get back to the video now that you wanted to watch and not hear me ramble about stuff. Alucard, the Vampire King. Ryomen Sukuna, the King of Curses. These two are the absolute pinnacles of power within their series. Even when the other strongest characters sacrifice their humanity to try and kill them, Alucard and Sukuna still remain at the peak of their verse. So naturally, who would win? This matchup is actually fairly complicated to try and discuss due to the different ways you can scale Jujutsu Kaisen characters and the different forms that each of them both have. So what I'll do is first compare pre-Schrodinger Alucard to Sukuna during the Shibuya incident. Then I'll put the winner of that against either Schrodinger Alucard or Megami Sukuna. Then I'll bring up full power Heian Era Sukuna versus Schrodinger Alucard at the end of the video. If you're going to enjoy this video, make sure to like, subscribe. I haven't made this type of content in a while, but I'm still active on my Discord server, so make sure to join that below. And without further ado, let's talk about Alucard versus Ryomen Sukuna. Let's open up with Alucard scaling, since it is far more simple to talk about by comparison to Jujutsu Kaisen. However, even then there is some leeway that you can have with it. Firstly, as a baseline, Alucard has a feat where he creates a fog spanning across all of Dover, which is calculated out to require the power of 57.43 kilotons of TNT in order to replicate. There's also the Blood River feat, which has a ton of different various ways you can calculate it. Some place it's so weak that it's not even able to destroy a few buildings, while some place it being able to destroy towns to cities. I'll leave the calcs in the description below, and I'm just going to leave this here as a possibility, so you can check out for yourself. There is one way to scale Alucard higher than this, since in the OVA, Alucard's capable of manipulating enough blood that it could span across a large portion of England. Not only is this very hard to calc, but this is also just not canon, so it just doesn't apply here. Speed-wise, and it's even more simple. The best showing of speed in Hellsing was when Alucard caught a bullet between his teeth, calculating out to over 83,000 miles per hour. When we get to Alucard's abilities, he has a lot of useful hacks in his arsenal. Firstly, his abilities can negate vampiric regeneration, he can turn intangible, he can use telekinesis and create illusions. The ability that this form of Alucard is most known for is his regeneration and his ability to come back from death. You see, Alucard houses a total of 3,424,867 souls within him, and whenever Alucard takes any lethal damage that can kill him, he will simply sacrifice one of those souls in his place. Basically, Alucard can quote-unquote die over 3 million times and still keep going. There's also some other noteworthy things, such as Alucard being able to predict his opponent's movements, resist illusions and mind control, shapeshift his body and sense the presence of others. He can also straight up absorb people and their souls into him, and also can use mind control. There's also then the restrictions that Alucard has on himself, which upon releasing makes him stronger. The pinnacle of which is also his potentially most vulnerable state, where Alucard utilises level 0, where he releases all 3 million souls as an army to attack at once. However, while this would overwhelm most opponents, this does leave him in a bit of a vulnerable state, as should his heart be destroyed, he will die permanently. There are some other tidbits here and there, but they aren't entirely relevant, so let's talk about Sukuna. At an absolute baseline for 15-finger Sukuna, he should be capable of punching the power required to destroy towns. This is due to the fact that in a weaker state, he's capable of trading blows with an armed Maki. This is the same Maki who's directly capable of withstanding the strongest attack that Urami has, and a weaker version of Urami's attack was used against Hakari later on, which was calculated out to 205 kilotons of TNT, or large town level. Sukuna also has stronger attacks such as Fuga and his Domain Expansion. Domain expansions in Jujutsu Kaisen are the pinnacle of a sorcerer's capabilities, making them their strongest attacks. Since Jogo states that Sukuna's domain would completely destroy his, Sukuna's domain expansion should logically scale higher than Jogo's. Jogo's domain expansion in specific was capable of creating a large mountain of iron, which is as powerful as 2.5 gigatons of TNT, or enough to destroy a large mountain. There is an argument to be made that Sukuna's physical punches could scale above Jogo's domain expansion, as Yuji perceived a full power Mahito to be more powerful than any cursed spirit he'd ever seen before, and Yuji is actively seeing Jogo use his domain expansion. However, Yuji could also just simply be referring to Jogo in specific and not the domain. Either way, Sukuna's domain expansion should at least be above it. Even then, if for some reason you don't think this line of scaling is valid, Sukuna can still scale far higher than this. Firstly, he scales above Yorozu, who's capable of creating a perfect sphere of metal, calculating out to 1.28 teratons of TNT, or small country level. There's also a feat in the climax of the manga, and while yes, this does involve Sukuna in his Heian era form, Sukuna in this instance is very weakened, and should scale relatively to his Shibuya self. This is due to the fact that Shibuya Sukuna is able to dog walk Jogo, Todo is able to take a black flash from this weakened Sukuna, Kusakabe is stated the strongest first grade sorcerer, making him stronger than Todo, and Kusakabe states that Jogo is far stronger than him. Todo is also able to withstand a few hits from Heian era Sukuna, so even if this does sound a bit too much of a reach, there is also the fact that Jogo is stated capable of giving Kenjaku a tough fight, who should scale above the likes of Todo. This feat involves Jacob's Ladder, a light-based attack which Sukuna not only reacts to after it's fired, but is also fast enough to punch the ground beneath him, which causes debris to fly up into the air at 33% the speed of light, meaning that these debris would have the kinetic energy of 10.35 teratons of TNT behind it. Speed-wise, and Sukuna should bare minimum be in the subsonic to hypersonic ranges. This is due to the fact he scales to Maki, as mentioned previously, who is capable of blocking lightning, which is calculated out to around 3,600 mph to 5,200 mph, although this is also a pretty big lowball. There is the infamous feat of Hikaru being able to avoid point-blank lightning. This calc would place Hikaru's speed anywhere from 2 million mph to 3.6 million mph. Since Maki is relative to Hikaru's speed, and 15-finger Sukuna fought Maki, he should be relative to this. However, the reason why this calc is so highly contested is because the lightning attack doesn't act the same way as normal lightning does, as this attack was literally guaranteed to hit Hikaru. The argument for this validity is that Hikaru was able to move fast enough to make it miss even its intended target, as it's quite clear that the lightning bolt was aimed at his head, and yet Hikaru was able to move it fast enough out of the way for him to hit his shoulder. Kashimo even states that he was aiming for the source of his cursed energy due to Hikaru's immortality later in the fight, which is either the brain or the stomach, as we directly see him attack the stomach later on as well. Even without those arguments, you could simply scale Sukuna to the debris moving at 33% the speed of light, as I mentioned previously, as Sukuna was fast enough to be able to jump up onto said debris before Jacob's Ladder hit the ground. Sukuna's abilities are pretty simple. His main abilities are his Curse Technique, Dismantle and Cleave. Dismantle is an invisible slashing attack, and Cleave is pretty much the same, however it adjusts to the opponent's durability, making it able to kill them faster. As mentioned before, Sukuna has fire-based attacks, being able to create a large fire explosion with Fuga. There's also his Domain Expansion, which is an environment constructed by the user's cursed energy, which makes their cursed technique guaranteed to hit the target, as the attacks physically do not exist until they make contact with the victim. Sukuna can also heal from damage with his reverse curse technique, allowing him to regenerate lost limbs and vital organs. He can mimic other techniques upon viewing them, and also, provided with a suitable host, he can possess someone. Sukuna also can resist poisons, fire attacks, and potentially damage to his soul. Sorcerers also can utilize ways of increasing their power, such as signing incantations or creating binding vows. Binding vows are essentially rules or deals made between either two people or oneself in order to make them capable of doing something that they weren't able to before in order to create their most ideal outcome. Sukuna is famous for abusing these, creating binding vows to create his fights easier, such as expanding the range of his domain expansion or increasing the power of Fuga, and being able to use the world dismantling cleave without the need for complex hand signs for doing so at first. Of course, binding vows do have a sort of drawback, however Sukuna is good at making these binding vow drawbacks not have as much impact in the fight. 15-finger Sukuna does have a small amount of weaknesses though, due to constantly looking down on everyone around him. He also, like other sorcerers, if his brain or gut is destroyed, he won't be able to regenerate himself and would die. Sukuna also has to make direct contact in order to use cleave, and due to the binding vow that Sukuna made with Yuji, he's only capable of controlling Yuji's body for a certain amount of time, so as a result, he's not around 24/7. So pre-Schrödinger Alucard versus Shibuya Sukuna is a very weird matchup to talk about. If you lowball Sukuna to his lowest stats, both Alucard and Sukuna would be relative in power and durability, with, depending on how you interpret the blood tsunami calc, you could have Alucard much more powerful. Alucard would also be much faster with superior speed. He'd be able to very easily chip away Sukuna and win, or just outright mind controlling him, since Sukuna's shown no resistance to that. However, I really don't think the higher end scaling for Sukuna is all that outrageous, since he flat out just does it. To put this feat into context, using the country level scaling and the 33% light speed scaling, Sukuna would be over 700,000 times stronger and over 2 times faster than Alucard. For some reason I said 2 here instead of 2,000. Also, did you miss the post-editing version of me? I hope so. Anyways. With this, Sukuna should be able to blitz and one-shot Alucard, but of course, with Alucard's ability to constantly come back with his souls, the fight is not going to end that quickly. While sure, Alucard can predict his opponent's movements, it's pretty outrageous to assume he'd be capable of doing that to someone moving thousands of times faster than him. That said, Alucard does have a couple ways of avoiding hits, such as his illusions and being able to turn intangible, but Sukuna could very easily deal with the illusions given his domain expansion, since it'd be able to hit every living thing within a large radius, and given his far greater speed, Alucard wouldn't be able to stop him. Plus, while you may be able to argue that Alucard may be able to see Dismantle and Cleave due to his enhanced sight and sensing abilities, not only would they be too fast for him to deal with, but Sukuna's domain expansion would make these hits unavoidable. But could Alucard absorb Sukuna's soul? I would say probably not. This is because Sukuna is able to directly ward off and harm Mahito, who is capable of directly manipulating one's souls. He also is capable of withstanding attacks from the Soul Split Katana, which, true to his name, bypasses durability and attacks the soul directly. However, in these instances, Sukuna is far stronger than these attacks, and when he's caught off guard by the Soul Split Katana or gets hit by punches from Yuji, who also directly attacks the soul, he is affected by those attacks. However, in the instances where he's capable of fighting off soul attacks, he is far stronger than the person trying to attack him, so considering you can scale him far higher than Alucard, it means that if Alucard tries to attack Sukuna's soul, he'd be able to very easily ward him off. So the question would be if Alucard's intangibility and sheer amount of lives would be able to outlast Sukuna before Sukuna kills him for good. To get it out of the way, if Alucard activates level 0, he's pretty much screwed on the spot, since Sukuna can just use his domain expansion and kill him in one attack. You could argue that Alucard wouldn't do this since Sukuna is so much stronger and faster than him, and Alucard has thousands of years of combat experience, but either way, if this were to happen, Sukuna would easily win. Otherwise, Alucard would basically have to remain in an intangible state the entire fight in order to not die, and if I'm honest, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if Sukuna created a binding vow which would allow him to hit Alucard, with the drawback of something like limiting the range of his domain or its potency, but seeing how he scales far higher than Alucard, that won't really affect anything. Alucard does have one win condition though. If Sukuna doesn't have enough cursed energy to one-shot Alucard 3 million times, then Alucard could just mind control Sukuna and get him to win that way. Not to mention that if you take this as an in-lore Shibuya era Sukuna, Sukuna's time is very limited due to Yuji. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if Alucard could just outlast Sukuna's time limit and then defeat Yuji. If you think that's a bit unfair for Sukuna, then firstly, blame Gege, not me, but if you don't want to include that, then you'd simply have Sukuna fighting for as long as he can, and the fight would be very hard to tell. We know that Sukuna has incredible stamina, being able to constantly fight groups of fighters all at once, and is also capable of using 3 domain expansions in one day, and considering the fact that you've got someone like Yuta Okotsu, who's one of the strongest in the series, and is stated to have bottomless cursed energy, and he can only open 1 domain expansion per day, it is pretty wild. Not to mention that while Alucard does have more experience than Sukuna, it's not like Sukuna's a complete idiot and has existed for thousands of years. Personally, I think that if you're using Sukuna to his full potential in 15 Finger in Shibuya, he would probably beat Alucard more times than not, but if you factor in Yuji's time limit, Alucard would just outlast him and kill Sukuna, again, providing that level 0 isn't used. But we're not done here. Let's go over Megami Sukuna versus pre-Schrodinger Alucard. Stats-wise, Sukuna should not be all that much different to his Shibuya era self, but logically he should be stronger since he has 19 fingers at the time of the Gojo fight. With a new body, Sukuna no longer has the time limit problem he has with Yuji and can act freely. He's also gained a new ability called the 10 Shadows technique. The 10 Shadows technique allows Sukuna to summon animal like Shinigami, each with their own abilities. For example, Nui can fly and shoot electricity, Max Elephant can use water attacks, Round Deer can heal injuries, etc, etc. The most well known and powerful of the 10 Shadows is Mahoraga, with the ability to, quote, adapt to all phenomena, and Sukuna can also take on the burden of adaptation too. With this, Mahoraga is very easily able to adapt to attacks that are as basic as just slashes, to something as abstract as the manipulation of space. With this, I think it's pretty clear that Sukuna would beat pre-Schrodinger Alucard. Not only does Sukuna not have the issue of being held back by the time limit like he did with Yuji, but he has an even easier way around Alucard's intangibility with Mahoraga's adaptation. I think it's pretty clear that Sukuna would very easily win. The only way you could have this form of Alucard winning would be to downplay Sukuna to his lower end stats, and that's still a bit questionable due to Mahoraga. There is one argument you can use to get Alucard to the speed of light. This follows as Alucard is a shadow-like substance and can manipulate shadows. Shadows can move at the speed of light, and thus Alucard can move at the speed of light. Not only is this incredibly flimsy and barely held together, in response to this, I'd simply say that there are better faster than light Jujutsu Kaisen arguments that are, if not as concrete or more so than this Alucard faster than light scaling, such as Kashimo attacking with electromagnetic waves, Yuta and Toga being able to react to attacks described as beams of light in the Jujutsu Kaisen video game, Sukuna is able to react to a massless attack, and while I wouldn't make these arguments on their own since I don't fully buy them, if you're going to bring up an argument for Alucard, then if you're being fair and giving Sukuna the same leeway, Sukuna would still be faster. Speaking of being unfair, if you use the non-canon feat of Alucard using enough blood to cover a portion of England, I would say that not only is Sukuna still stronger due to being outright country level, but you could even argue he's planet level due to him being said to be able to destroy the world, or scaling above Yuki, whose suicide black hole attack could destroy the planet. Again, these arguments have big flaws to them, but they're more concrete than using non-canon material for Alucard. Needless to say, no matter how you look at it, Megami Sukuna would beat pre-Schrodinger Alucard, at least in my opinion. When Alucard gains Schrodinger, he gains abilities and loses abilities. He loses all 3 million souls within him, meaning that should he die once, he'll die for good. However, the substitute of that is that he has the abilities of Schrodinger, the ability to exist everywhere yet nowhere at once, having an illogical existence and not being able to be killed by conventional means. So, could Megami Sukuna overcome this immortality? I would wager to say probably not. Due to his far higher strength, speed and durability, he still would be able to kill someone who exists illogically and exists in every place at once and yet doesn't at the same time. The only chance Sukuna realistically has is Mahoraga, and then the question is, can Mahoraga adapt to Schrodinger? If you take the statement of Mahoraga being able to adapt to any phenomena as correct, then I guess technically Sukuna would be able to adapt to Alucard's immortality. Although this is a bit of a no-limits fallacy, as there's no reason to believe that Mahoraga could adapt to something as abstract and insane as Schrodinger, as nothing like that exists in Jujutsu Kaisen. Even if you can say that Mahoraga adapts to Alucard, it would still take time to do so, and within that time Alucard would just hypnotise Sukuna and then it's over. But what about Heian era Sukuna? Well, in this state, Sukuna doesn't have the 10 Shadows anymore, but in exchange has the World Divining Cleave, which cuts through space and targets existence itself. Could this hit Alucard? On the surface, potentially, as Alucard is existence and Sukuna's attack targets existence, so one could make the connection that Sukuna could deal lasting damage to Alucard in this state. However, while Alucard is existence, he's also not existence simultaneously. Again, he exists nowhere yet everywhere at the same time. His existence is completely illogical. So an attack like that simply wouldn't be able to kill Alucard, since it wouldn't be where the attack is. Overall, I see the outcome of this matchup going down as such. 15-finger Sukuna would beat Alucard if it wasn't for Yuji's time limit, with Megami Sukuna being able to easily stop pre-Schrodinger Alucard. However, with Schrodinger, Sukuna just doesn't have a way that would allow him to kill Alucard, or, at the bare minimum, be able to kill Alucard fast enough to the point where Alucard wouldn't be able to hypnotize him. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment below your thoughts on this matchup, and I'll see you all next time.